Hello thinkers, it's me, Thankyou, swinging on by because there's a huge question I think we all need addressed, and it only really occurred to me after playing Breath of the Wild for the upteenth time, then deciding to let's play it only to pick up Ocarina of Time and forget all about that idea for a while, and then it got me to thinking, just what is Link's fighting style? I mean, that's a pretty broad question, unless we narrow it down to just his sword and shield, and even then, that's pretty tough to answer, no matter how you slice it. So, to help cut this challenging question down to something more manageable, I've got a rather sharp friend of mine joining me to help out. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me today for my first collaboration is a very special guest. It's Christafurr. Say hello. Oh, right. You didn't like that introduction when I gave you the script, did you? Right. One moment, please.
Hello everyone, Wily here to help, and I've been doing a huge amount of research into Link's weapons, as well as other areas of European sword styles.
Oh, and don't forget, we made a video analyzing the hidden skills of the hero Shade from Twilight Princess. Make sure you all check out that video too, thinkers. A link to that video will be in the top right corner, as well as a link to Dr.Wily's channel in the description too.
Alright, so cutting to the chase, what kind of weapons are we looking at today?
A fair question to ask, seeing as to understand how Link fights, we also need to understand the weapons he uses.
Weapons have feelings?
What? No. Anyway, to simplify things, let's just keep it to Link's Master Sword and Hylian Shield, starting with the Master Sword.
Link wields it with one hand and performs a series of short sword techniques for the most part. When we think of European short swords, usually we encounter two common types: aiming swords with a crossguard and basket-hilt swords covering the entire wrist and hand.
Please keep in mind there are many other kinds of swords out there. These two types are fairly typical short swords seen across Europe in the medieval ages. The thing about our boy Link here, however, is, well, he isn't your typical kind of Hylian. And neither is his sword or shield. Looking directly at the Master Sword, it sports a massive cross-shaped cruciform guard, and Link holds it with one hand like we see here. One might think this to be an arming type short sword. However, the Master Sword isn't actually what we think it is. You see, it's not actually a short sword.
Wait, but how? Link wields it with one hand usually.
Well, if you look closely at the handle of the Master Sword and measure how long it actually is, it's actually a hand-and-a-half sword, also known as a bastard sword. It can be used like an arming type short sword, but it can also be used to perform longsword techniques to some extent as well because of the length of its hilt.
So all this time Link could have been swinging this sword with two hands?
Well, yes, in theory anyway.
What about its weight and design?
Well, closely analyzing the sword, we can definitely see some glaring issues. For a start, it's incredibly thick for any kind of European sword. Even long swords weren't this thick. At least, not this thick from hilt to blade tip. This thinning of the blade from hilt to tip is called distilled tapering. It's not the only way to adjust a blade's weight, but regardless, correct weighting is vital, otherwise you can't use a sword properly for how it's designed. A sword that is too thick and too heavy is unwieldy.
And looking at the Master Sword, oh golly god, this thing is basically an inch thick from hilt to tip. But Wily, why is the Master Sword so thick then? Well, I'd have to say that its design comes down to the developer's viewpoint. The developers are for the most part based in Japan, and ultimately that's going to have a bit of an influence, as they are reinterpreting a European sword-based fighting system and weapons in their own way to create something unique. The Master Sword is actually designed in part a lot like the katana. Yes, obviously there's no curve and it's double-edged. However, what is it about the katana that the swords have in common? For starters, a katana does not usually have distilled tapering either. The core of the Master Sword is super thick all the way from the hilt to the tip, making this sword fairly heavy, which makes it super hard for the average human to wield. But it does essentially make it one heck of a cutter. And there you go. Yet another similarity to the katana as it excels at cutting.
It should be said, however, that a katana is weighted very well for its purposes and is lighter for different reasons. However, we won't go into that here. The Master Sword is highly optimized for cutting, but it's super heavy. Finding a chosen person who could actually wield the Master Sword effectively is going to be pretty rare. Thankfully, our chosen hero Link here has literally borderline god tier strength, so wielding a sword like this would be fine. It probably wouldn't even be noticeable for him.
So the Master Sword is actually not a short sword at all, but a hand and a half sword, and its weighting makes it so ridiculously heavy that only certain people could ever wield it.
Yeah, pretty much. Moving on, let's talk about shields. There are typically two kinds of shields, and both types were always used for protecting your body, teammate, and also your hands.
What? Your hands? Doesn't the sword guard do that?
Well, yes. To a point. However, whenever you swing a sword, you typically will cover your hands mid-swing with the shield. You can do this with both types of shields. However, a center grip shield is far more versatile and mobile in movement, as you can rotate it in your hand to face any direction when half covering the hands. Also, on a side note, smaller sized center grip shields were typically far more optimized for dueling one-on-one. A strap shield, however, whilst less maneuverable, is far less likely to be knocked from your hand and offers more coverage for protection and also for obscuring your attacks from your opponent, keeping them hidden before it's too late to react. This type of shield was favored in group combat but could also be used in dueling, but was a bit trickier due to the mobility issues raised.
Well, with all that said, let's take a look directly at the Hylian shield. It's quite clearly a strap shield, and its design is known as a heather shield. These ones were kind of large enough to be used in formations and group battles, but also small enough to duel with. So for a strap shield, the Hylian shield is actually quite a good pick for Link, as it's a good all-rounder. Also, despite the mobility issues strap shields present, when half covering your hands, it's actually very possible to overcome these problems to a fairly decent extent with a few adjustments to your form. However, great maneuverability is always helpful. One other thing to note is that the Hylian shield has no wood backing, making it extremely heavy, meaning that Link is probably one of the only people who can actually carry it, let alone use it.
But this shield was even used by other Hylian knights. This means Hylians are naturally very strong, but that's a topic for another video. Now that we've gotten a lay of the land and a deeper understanding of Link's weaponry, we can apply this to Link's movements and break down his shield and sword forms into something far more digestible than an interpretive dance.
In Breath of the Wild, Link primarily performs cutting attacks with no thrusts to be seen at all. He can also perform the jump attack, shield parry, and a spin attack. In Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Majora's Mask, we see Link perform both cutting attacks, thrusts, as well as jump attacks.
They all share a few things in common regarding form and technique. Firstly, Link loads his attacks from behind his shield from the back shoulder usually. Now this kind of movement is something widespread across Europe, but a great example of where this can be seen is from a famous late 14th century knight and weapon master, Fiore de Liberi, a man reputed for his long sword techniques among many other things. We see some various adaptations in many different sword systems for short sword styles that involve both arming swords and basket hilt swords, and in Link's case, his stance is a short sword variation of Fiore's longsword stance, Sword of the Lady. Now I can't possibly confirm without asking the developers of Nintendo directly if this was their inspiration, but I can tell you that it most certainly has been a very common adaptation across Europe towards fighting styles involving the short sword as well. Now, don't be deceived, thinkers, Link does have a very Norse-looking appearance. Although his weapon and character design is highly European in appearance, his style is very reminiscent of the Japanese samurai.
Every single iteration of Link we see has an extreme amount of cut-based attacks, and the samurai never really used shields as the katana and spears were typically two-handed weapons, and if they required a second weapon for parrying, they would use a sidearm. They would carry a shorter blade like a washizaki or a tanto, which they mostly used for blocking, parrying, and attacking. They were very duelist-centric, even on the battlefield. If they were fighting in groups, often their battles would become very messy one-on-one duels, as most of their weapons were designed far more for close quarters and offered very little defense. They only had spears and in some cases polearms and bows, although they did develop firearms, but that was much later. So when we look at how the samurai fought with their swords, they are very reminiscent of Link.
He too is very duelist-centric, even in group battles. Despite his predilections towards dueling one-on-one, often Link fights whilst constantly on the move, a very intelligent 1v1 tactic, as that draws opponents out from groups into single combat because everyone has different fitness levels and running speeds, causing people to naturally end up trailing off from the group. One other thing to mention, although it is a bit of a tangent, is the fact that Link has a huge arsenal of other items and abilities to throw into the fray, but we are only looking at how Link fights with just a sword and shield.
But wait, Thinkafurr, what does all of this mean for Link?
We'll answer that in just a moment, but firstly we need to address the weaknesses in Link's technique and form. Now, this may be a little upsetting at first, but stick with me and hear me out if you can, thinkers. After looking very closely at how Link moves across all games, I gotta say it. I'm sorry, but I need to be fairly blunt. Link's fighting technique with a shield and sword is fairly subpar. Honestly, I'd rate it a 4 out of 10, and even then, that's being generous.
Also, he barely half covers with his shield to protect his hands and fingers from being cut off mid-swing. And when he does a cut attack, he completely ignores his shield, swinging it behind him when he should be holding it in front of him.
I guess visually, it suits the courageous mantra theme Nintendo's going for, but there's a fine line between being courageous, looking badass, and well, creating unnecessary danger for yourself. The only time we see Link utilize half covers and hold his shield out in a way that's actually useful is, well, when he's dead. Or more specifically, when Link from Ocarina of Time became the hero's shade in Twilight Princess. Oh no, spoilers!
Oh please, that's hardly a spoiler, it's 2020. Anyway, this Link, the hero Shade, aka the hero of time, has a great stance. It can allow for thrusts over the shield more easily, as well as performing cuts without nearly as much telegraphing as the other Links do. He also keeps his shield in front when attacking, and we see him cover his hands even with the basic attacks. Truly, the hero Shade, aka Link, the hero of time, was a seasoned warrior. He even teaches Link, the hero of Twilight, all of his various hidden moves. The ending blow, shield attack, backslice, helm splitter, mortal draw, jump strike, and great spin, all of which are actually viable to some extent. During these moves, Link actually utilizes a half cover with his shield. He even holds his shield in front when swinging. Also, Link learned something that is very useful and was widely performed across Europe that no other Link can really do: a shield bash. Like seriously, what was Nintendo thinking not having a shield bash in the other games? I can't tell you how many times I'd have liked to follow up a sword cut or initiate an attack with a solid shield bash to the face before nailing a bokoblin with the stabby end of the Master Sword.
Punching people in the face with a shield is always fun, I can't even argue that. But why does Link have poor form? Well, an interesting take on it would be that Link is actually very reliant on his abilities. More to the point, his physical attributes such as strength, speed, and stamina. He can pretty much perform 20 attacks in the span of a second and you won't know you're in pieces before you've even finished a single move. And if you live long enough to trouble Link, he has an enormous amount of stamina and strength. And let's not forget, he has a huge arsenal of abilities and other items which can greatly augment his strength, speed, and stamina even further. Just look at him parrying a Lionel moving at full charge. It's like a literal walk in the park. Never mind how much force his legs are bracing against. I can't even fathom that. Thankfully, the YouTube channel, because science did all the working out for that stuff. One of the most mind-boggling calculations was the fact that the raw amount of pressure Link can exert behind the Master Sword is actually greater than the pressure of the center of our very Earth's core, and the fact that he is durable enough to withstand the forces he can exert. I mean, that's gotta be way more than a typical human, let alone a normal Hylian. Like seriously, just let that sink in for a moment, because we are dealing with forces that are insane. Anyway, I'm kinda getting off topic a little bit. We all know Link is well endowed, but look, in summation, Link's entire style of fighting is basically some technique completely overpowered by the glaring fact he's a hyper-agile duelist with ultra strength, super speed, and monstrous endurance.
Honestly, there isn't much out there in Hyrule that can top this style. However, there are definitely limitations for his reliance on these physical gifts.
Let's just go over a few. The first limitation is how open Link is to others' attacks when he himself is attacking. Link is terribly open to attacks from a lot of different angles because when he attacks, he always swings that shield back instead of holding it out in front of him. All it takes is for someone with a spear to attack when he's attacking, for his own body to be hit. I can't tell you how many times I've been frustrated by a bokoblin with a spear for this very reason. Ugh.
Link isn't a machine and we all tire out eventually, and he's not an exception to this. His reliance on his physical gifts and his duelist-centric style has nearly cost him his life in the past. A great example of this happening was actually in group combat with a swarm of guardians, a mechanical type of enemy that simply will not tire out and will continue to relentlessly attack until destroyed. Whilst it's notable that the valiant and incredibly powerful hero of the wild fought and destroyed a truly massive amount of guardians, he eventually was mortally wounded, because he ran out of energy and couldn't defend himself intelligently any longer, requiring Zelda to step in and protect him. And even after that, he still passes out from exhaustion, and yeah, okay, he took some damage, but this is what happens when you rely on physical abilities too much.
So what you're saying, Wily, in short, is that guardians do not tire. They aren't as strong as Link or as fast, but they are relentless until incapacitated, and whilst Link vastly outpaces and outmatches a guardian, Link simply ran out of stamina and tired out.
Yes, that's exactly my point.
So after some solid critique of Link's form, we found a few issues and times it's really costed Link. But what about the instances where Link's fighting methods actually work?
Well, weapons like a sword and shield are heavily optimized for humans fighting humans. Thankfully though, a large amount of Link's foes are actually humanoids or humanoid monsters. Think of the bokoblins, moblins, Gerudo warriors, Yiga, Iron Knuckle, Stelphos, and Deku Scrubs.
This is true. However, a sword is fairly versatile and can be useful against other types of monsters, given the right circumstances, which is where Link's physical attributes come into play. Monsters can come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, and have a variety of different abilities. Honestly, if it wasn't for Link's physical attributes, he wouldn't be able to defeat even a basic Dodongo, which you really do rely on his speed, as most of the time you're rolling around or jumping around its side to attack its weaker, softer, posterior surface.
Or you could just feed it bombs and call it a day.
Well, yeah, that's also true. But when it comes to Link's shield and sword, basically Link is, for a better word, a monster slayer. This is where Link has an actual need for a duelist-centric style, and this is exactly why he relies on those physical attributes of his. Now, like all things, fighting styles come with their strengths and weaknesses. Heroes are no exception to this either. Honestly, if Link didn't have a weak point, then how could we truly relate to him? He would become a Gary Stu. His tales of legend would be cheapened by the notion he was infallible, which just isn't the case. His story, the hero's story, has always been one of courage, facing overwhelming odds, training hard, and tempering his soul, pursuing a path of self-improvement and intense preparation.
If by that last part you really mean cooking a whole inventory of hearthy truffles, well cooked with a side dish of prime meat, and consuming them all in the heat of battle to heal up with no problems whatsoever to Link's digestion or gut lining?
Yeah, Link's got a lot of guts. He's got that Triforce of Courage after all. Well guys, that's our take on Link's fighting style with the shield and sword. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me and Wily know what you thought in the comments below. If you want to see more videos, hit the subscribe button to Thankyou.
And Wily!
Don't forget to click the bell icon either so you can get all the updates. Also, for the other half of this collaboration where Wily and I break down the secret hidden skills of the hero's shade, the link to that video should appear right about now. Also, don't forget, if you want to support both our channels, consider becoming a member on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can help keep our channels going as well as get cool insider updates. You might even get your name in the credits of a video. Links to our Patreons will be in the description below. Anyhow, that's it for this video, Thinkers. I've been Thankyou, and it's been a real honor to have you join me in this video, Dr. Wily. Thanks so much.
No problem, and also don't forget, there's also a little video that you and I did over on my channel about the hero Shade and his hidden skills and everything. It's quite interesting. Go have a look.
Hopefully, in the next video, we'll actually talk about...
Well, hey, whoa, wait. Next video? Wait, who signed that agreement? I don't remember this. Cutlo, was that you? I've got my garden at home to worry about. My onion patch at home really needs my attention.
Onion patch, hey. You're a man with many layers, Wily. But fear not, we'll sort that out later. By the way, I heard parfaits are delicious. Have you ever tried one?
What? No.
Parfaits may probably be the most delicious thing in the whole dang planet.
You know, I think I prefer talking about the video I did, damn it.